Joining us is Jonathan Schanzer, Vice President of Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
All right, all eyes on this meeting. Did the president really accomplish? I know he said he cleared the air with Saudi Arabia. Did he clear the air, or did Saudi Arabia give him a couple of lessons as well?
Well, I don't think the air is clear. I think it's still rather cloudy. Let's say those are dark clouds that we're seeing right now, and that is we're watching, I think, really the unraveling of the U.S. Saudi relationship, at least as we have known it up until now. The relationship has always been based on the United States providing security for Iran in exchange for a steady supply of relatively inexpensive oil. And what we've seen over the last 7 years, the Obama administration has steadily eroded Saudi security in the Middle East by drawing closer to Iran, signing a nuclear deal with Iran, giving Iran $100 billion in sanctions relief, and effectively giving it a clear path to a fully legitimized nuclear program after roughly 10 or perhaps maybe 15 years. So the Saudis are furious about that, but then there's also the fact that oil is no longer the commodity that it once was, that the United States is now able, through new technology, through fracking and the like, to produce its own oil. That we're essentially an oil exporter now. The price of oil has dropped significantly, and so Saudi Arabia's role with us is just not what it used to be. And then add to that one last element, and that is the lingering distrust that we have had with the Saudis ever since 9/11, knowing that 15 out of the 19 hijackers were Saudis, that there are 28 pages from the from the 9/11 Commission report that include Saudi Arabia in ways that the U.S. Congress is still trying to get exposed. But the bottom line is this has been a relationship that has been long one of convenience, one that has been fraught with tension, and it does look like it's now unraveling for the world to see.
I guess the bottom line is Saudi Arabia still a U.S. ally? It seems that isn't really clear after the president has left.
I think, look, the Saudis are technically still a U.S. ally. I think they don't have any other protector out there in the world, and that the U.S. is still technically committed to preserving the Saudi kingdom. But I think from a lot of people's perspective right now, it's really a question of, is the United States still an ally to Saudi Arabia? After having signed that deal, a lot of countries have been asking this question. I mean, the Israelis have asked it to be certain, and many of the other Sunni states are wondering that as well, because of the overall fear that many of these countries have for Iran and the terrorist proxies that it sponsors. And because of the fear of knowing what Iran would do with a nuclear weapon once it gets it, there are a lot of countries now who are wondering why it was that they invested so much in the U.S. relationship when it can be undone by one president in less than a decade. And that's really the question we're hearing across the Middle East right now.
Is there a sense that the president and this administration gets that now? I mean, all those criticisms were out there when this deal was struck, and now we're seeing the fruition of all the feelings and all the negativity are really coming home to roost here for this president.
Yeah, I think that's right, and the president is getting a cold shoulder in many places right now. Not just in Saudi Arabia, but he's finding that anyone who is opposed to this deal, that they're unhappy with him. But look, even in Europe, we're seeing there was a famous article, now famous, written by Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic, where he had interviewed the president, and the president was trashing Britain. Was trashing other European allies, and so there's a sense in Washington now, when we look at the Obama doctrine, as we might call it, that it has been one that has alienated friends and emboldened enemies, and I think we're seeing that play out right now, certainly at this GCC summit in Riyadh.
Why? Why did he do it? Everyone has been wondering, does he want to leave? Is this about leaving legacies of deals, or does he feel that it was the right thing to do?
Well, I think that this arguably is the president's only foreign policy success, and I think one can question whether it truly was a success, because I think we've got a ways to go. That and the fact that we've already seen Iran, test ballistic missiles and continue to carry out terrorist attacks and human rights violations. So I think there's a question of what one gains from a deal that doesn't stop Iran from doing all of those things. But I think the president views the deal as something of a Nixon to China moment, where he has opened up new diplomatic relations with a country that was, that remains hostile to the United States. And we continue to see that from the utterances of the Supreme Leader as well as other senior leaders within Iran. So I think he sees that as a success, and he also sees this idea of perhaps shifting alliances in the Middle East, where we really didn't, the United States didn't have good options, that it sort of felt like we were being forced into wars constantly. And I think the president thinks that he's gotten us out of wars. He's going to prevent the United States from getting drawn in any further by shifting some of our alliances, by shifting some of our priorities, by pushing away certain allies that have at least caused him to have some concerns. And so he thinks that he's doing this, or at least as he says, that he's doing this for the good of the United States and for the betterment of our position in the Middle East. I think there are a lot of people here in the United States, roughly 60 to 65%, who would vehemently disagree.
Jonathan, let me finally ask you, what can be done in the future with the next president? He's done all these foreign policy renovations, if you just described. Can somebody come into this House and take it back to the way it was, or will they want to?
Well, I think that I think you'd have to take a look at each of the presidential candidates. I mean, we see Bernie Sanders, who doesn't have much of a foreign policy at all, and it's unclear what he would do. I think if you look at Hillary Clinton, I think she's already disagreed on certain elements of the Iran deal, and certainly has been, I think, an opponent of the president's Syria policy, has criticized the president with regard to his relationship with Israel. And so one gets a sense that things would change. Would they change 180 degrees? Probably not. Could we say 20, 30, 40 degrees? I think that seems realistic, and we'll just have to wait and see. On the Republican side, you're seeing, Senator Ted Cruz saying that he would tear up the Iran deal on day one, and he really would like things to get back to the status quo ante. And then there's the big question mark of Donald Trump, and I think there are many people who are still waiting to see what Donald Trump's foreign policy looks like. So much of it has been, I think, sort of leaked out ad hoc, and so I think people are still waiting to see what a Trump policy or a Trump doctrine would even look like.
Yeah, we know with him it's in flux. Jonathan Schanzer, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, anytime.
Jonathan Schanzer, Vice President of Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, as we talk about the United States and Saudi relations.